Well,
Go ahead.
sure, yeah, I'll take that. Obviously, we reached him. We tried to get in touch with him, but he won't talk about it to anyone, really. His own film, on record or publicly. I don't want to speak for him. I can't really say why. It could be legal reasons, could be emotional, I don't really know. Maybe both, maybe something else entirely, I don't know. But there's kind of an interesting story, because that kind of mattered to me. When I was, when we were shooting in London, we were 4 days in, and we had, it was a reunion sort of for the crew members, because Michael Schlingman, one of the interviewees, was considering doing it I think a couple of years ago, and I asked if he was still interested in doing that. And he said, well, I kind of forgot about it, but maybe we should do it anyway, just for the heck of it. And none of us were thinking Dick Williams would come, and he didn't, but all these other artists and animators did. And Roy Nesbitt was there, who was his collaborator from the start, and he's just like the sweetest guy, like really wonderful and a genius. He's like someone who belongs in like the Renaissance or something like that, at the base of artistic mind operates. And he's just a really nice guy, and we got to talking, and I called him the next day asking, because we were going to shoot some material at where the studio used to be in Soho Square. We didn't use any of the footage in the final version, of course, but it was just something to kind of do, like a ghost tour, sort of. We had a couple animators show, this is where the ink and paint used to be, this is where Omar sat, well, from the 60s to the 80s. But before we shot that, we asked Roy if maybe he'd like to come along, because he was very supportive. And actually, we asked Roy if he'd want to go on camera. And he said, oh, sure, if there's anything else I can do, And I figured, well, this is really the chance to talk. And I said, well, why don't you ask, Richard if he might want to, I don't know, talk or show up or something. And he said, why not? And 45 minutes later, I'm pacing back and forth in Kensington, making a little divot in the ground. And I got a call back from Roy, and that sweet enthusiasm kind of diminished at this point. And said, kind of in a sad but also kind of irritated tone, saying, Dick still won't talk about the movie, And when I heard that, I knew Richard Williams was going to say no. I knew it, but I knew that intellectually. But this was the first time I knew it, like emotionally, and it really hit me. And I felt like someone in the paparazzi or a tabloid or something. Like this felt like I was harassing this old man who just wanted to be left alone. And I just and I sat there, and Sarah, my line producer, was with me, and we figured we should probably just get some exercise or something, like walk us off, get some dinner. And I was just sort of catatonic, and I said, literally, as we were walking, I said, I think we should just call it quits. And I was serious. I was pretty damn serious about it, too. But she very rationally said, well, look, you knew that Dick was going to say no. You knew that from the start, But everyone else has said yes, And all these other artists and animators and friends and collaborators and everyone else feels that this is a story worth sharing. And we were already there in London. We had the budget. We had about 10 or 12 other interviews to do. And so I just persisted with that, basically. And I can't really say for certain. He just won't go on record about it. And I think if anyone, it seems that from what I gathered, if anyone ever brings it up at a Q&A, ooh, talk about the thief and the cobbler. I think I think most people know not to do that. And if anyone's stupid enough to do that, there's quietness.
Whether or not his reaction to
Yes,
Yeah, well,
the documentary.
he's certainly aware of it and everything, and we're waiting to hear what his reaction is, basically. I don't know if it is a parable, and I certainly am not setting out. I think there's things maybe to learn from it, but I'm kind of I'm less interested in the answers than I am in the conversation, because so much of what we have is just anecdotes. This is the first singular work, written or filmed or otherwise, that attempts, and that's a key word, attempts to tell this story. I mean, mine's not the ultimate authority, but it's my stab at telling the story, with all of its limitations and flaws and stuff. And, and so I kind of felt that it's not so much a parable as it is just a unique point in time in this unique world with an extremely unique and amazing individual who's this amazing artist, and a unique series of circumstances occurred. So I don't know if there is an ultimate message like, oh, don't do anything creative or else it'll screw you over in the end, or don't dream. It's like you have to be kind of crazy and dedicated and obsessed to make anything like of this caliber even close to happening. So, and even though his film never saw the light of day as he envisioned it, all of the work he did in pumping money into it, in training his staff, in learning from the old masters, in training himself, because he always considered himself the student and always as the trainee, his own harshest critic, all of the work and experimentation and learning he had through those commercial assignments, from Roger Rabbit, Christmas Carol, to Fanta and Crest the Bear and all that stuff, those were all exercises to training for the film, but also he trained hundreds of artists many of which were still working today and teaching other people today, and producing stuff that we're so inundated with animation that we take it for granted, and so it's kind of interesting to see that these real artists working on something like this and bringing it to life. It is an underappreciated art form, and I think he did elevate it. I hope it's for healthy reasons. I don't know. I love animation. I knew about Richard Williams because I did like some stop motion stuff when I was a teenager and stuff, and I read his book. Not knowing anything about Thief and the Cobbler or whatever, and that's like the book. I think if 9 out of 10 animators, if you approach them and say, where should I start to learn animation, they'll probably point you to that book, and so I was aware of his stuff and everything, but I didn't know about that story. But I think so. There's a part of me that's sort of like the animation and filmmaking enthusiast that I am, but I think what really made me latch on to the project was the human story. That was always the through line. Sure, there's a lot that like animation nerds or like film buffs will get out of it, but I think the most important core is that it's a portrait of an artist, but also of a human being, of a real person, and that story was, I don't know, maybe I'm nowhere near as skilled at anything as he is, and I never will be. But maybe there's something that I can see in myself with that. You kind of have to be that determined or involved. Were there any other forms of animation the studio was interested in? And if they were to try out stop motion, that would require a different team of artists. You're working. It's animation collectively, yes, but it requires different resources, different skills. You need sculptors and armature makers and a different sort of thing. Computers, for the most part, that didn't happen until the last couple of years of production, and Williams was vehemently against using that as a tool, and understandably so, because it was still a little shaky. You can still look at movies from the 80s and early 90s, animated movies, and they don't really quite blend all that well, the CG stuff and the 2D stuff, even when they're mixed together. As far as like keyframing and stuff, a lot of that stuff either was still very much in an infantile stage or just didn't exist yet. And it requires a different sort of sensibility and resources. But, as you can see, the styles are tremendous, the oil paint stuff for like the Shell commercials and stuff that's just pencil, or the really heavy, like dense cells, stuff that's very cartoonish, stuff that's very realistic. They were all means of figuring out what you could do, because it was his thesis that, his philosophy that with animation you can do anything, really. Oh, sure. Yeah. No, it's like, yeah. We're basically just showing it places that will allow that to happen, So it's a quagmire of clearances and things. So I don't need to make a single buck off this thing if I can't, really. Maybe I'll try, but I don't need to, because it was relatively inexpensive. It was a passion project. It's, any four movies are expensive, so maybe the next one will be a bit safer, but it was something that I don't need to, it's not a cash cow for me or anything. It's just a story that I kind of wanted to tell, so, we'll see.
What?
One shot? No video released after that?
Well,
I don't know.
Yes, you have
Come
to.
on.
You have to clear rights.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of money.
Sure, yeah, it's
The
tremendous amount of
music,
money,
the
yeah.
animated stuff,
Totally, yeah. It's a lot of everything, so. But we have been speaking with people who know a lot about this stuff, documentary clearances, and we've been meticulously analyzing everything down to the frame, like, if this is 3 frames shorter, it's okay, and for fair use, and really meticulous stuff. So we'll see what happens. A lot ended up in the garbage, literally. Some of it was stolen by, which is much better than being in the garbage, by some of the animators who want to salvage it. And who knows, maybe there's a vault, the Disney vault, literally, that has some crap in there or something. I don't know. A lot of what we have is mostly just from Garrett Gilchrist, who did the fan edit, the recobbled cut, which was tremendously important. I mean, that's how I became aware of the story, and this project couldn't have been possible without him. I'm really building off of his research and taking it to the next step. He had a lot of this stuff provided already, and from other artists and animators. And as we talked to more and more people, more stuff would show up. A couple drawings, or photographs, or whatever. I think we accrued probably a total of close to 2 hours of footage that hasn't been seen in over 20 years by anyone. So that was really quite special, seeing these line tests. And it's like, you can see the styles become more clarified and sharpened, and you can, character designs evolve. It's almost like looking at transitional forms in like the fossil record. You see the steps that didn't quite work and the ones that flourished, and it's really interesting to see what is there. And yet that's just a tiny fragment of what is still out there and what was out there and isn't anymore. So, Thief and the Cobbler, recobbled cut, fan edit, sure. Yeah, I mean, Garrett's done an amazing job with that. And it's a similar thing, just like, from his own resources, just passionately piecing together and trying to make a version that he feels best resembles what Richard Williams intended. And judging by the other versions that are out there, it definitely is the closest, There were a couple of television documentaries made, thankfully a couple in the public domain, just talking about, oh, and by the way, here's this innovator, this artist making a big feature film, in London. And that would be the same story over those 25, almost 30 years. And it's so interesting because you see the guy age and everything, but he's the same guy inside. He's the same enthusiastic, passionate, driven guy. Even though his hair's changing color or he's, different clothing on, it's the same person. And, that was just really quite interesting to see that change. And again, just literally, where that stuff came from was, again, Garrett had a lot of it found, and sometimes we find more footage or better quality stuff from the artists who I got in touch with, Stars Denver in top of November. It's going to have its New York East Coast premiere at Doc NYC, which actually this is the first time I'm saying that, so congratulations, you're the first to hear that in the world. And European release in Leeds was the week after, so that'll be 1 week after another. There'll be a little tour, and then there are a couple things happening in 2013 that I can't mention yet, but we'll see what happens. Okay.
Bring them up.
Sure. Well, we have a really special guest. His name is Steve Evangelatos. He's a Vancouver native who worked on the film in the last couple of years in its most tumultuous years. So please welcome Steve.
I got a jacket out of it anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
That's the true one. So this is, I guess.
Take it away.
Sure. Well, this is, I guess, sort of an interview live, a deleted scene from the movie, I guess we could call it.
Yeah.
So, a happening. So, basically, I just want to ask, first off, how did someone from Vancouver get involved in a film that was being made 6,000 miles away in the UK, in London?
Yeah. I actually have only been in Vancouver I came to Vancouver a couple of years after working on the film. I was actually from the East Coast, and I was working in Germany for a couple of years, a few different projects over there, and I'd been a fan of Richard Williams for, I guess I was about 28 when they were hiring for the film, and I'd been a fan of his for 10 years at that point. I had a copy of his commercial reel, which was, in the animation industry, it was legendary, and he was a legend himself. Everybody wanted to work for him. So anyway, I'm working in Germany, and I just hear through the grapevine that Richard Williams is hiring. He's going to start The Thief and the Cobbler again. I was like, oh my God. Well, I'll send in my reel, and at least I can tell my grandkids that I applied for the job, And that itself was amazing. And then I get a call back. It's like his producer calls back and says, Dick really liked your reel, and can you fly to London and come for an interview? So I did. and couldn't believe it. It's like, there he is. I was shaking his hand. It's like, this is my animation god, you know. And so yeah, so I packed things up in Germany. I moved to London, and yeah, and then I had my first date. You want to hear a funny story? Okay. I was staying out in Camden where Universal Studios Animation was. A friend of mine was working there. So it was my first, I hadn't gotten a place yet. I figured I'll find some other people at the studio who want to get together and get a house or something downtown. So I'm staying way out there, and I didn't realize that it's not a half-hour ride from Camden into London. It's about a 2-hour subway ride. So I ended up for work on my first day over an hour late. Yeah, so I walk in, and I pass the producer, and I go, oh, so where's my desk? And she goes, Dick's really mad at you. I said, really? Okay, well, I'll figure it out. She shows me a desk, and I get myself set up, and I go over, and everything's in one big room. This is like, it's a room about the size of this theater, and Dick's desk was over in a corner, and so I walk over, and hey Dick, remember me, I'm Steve. I'm here to start you got a scene for me to start on? He's got his head down, and he's just working away, like he's not even paying attention to me. He's flipping, and he starts mumbling under his breath. Canadian animators, they think they're hot shit. They come over here and they think they're just God's gift to animation. And then he starts talking louder and louder, and I'm backing away. It's like, in the old days in an animation studio, you had all kinds of cool sounds going on all the time, like paper flipping, not cool sounds, but loud. Like it's just a clatter of crap going on, pencil sharpeners, the tinny sound of people's earphones. Slowly, this all just dies down. Quieter, until the only sound in the whole studio is Dick screaming his head off. He's just screaming at me. And finally he stops. He just goes back to work. And I'm just standing there like white. And I back away, and I just thought, well, you know, I guess I worked at Richard Williams for half a day. And as I walk away, and Margaret, the ink and paint person, comes up and goes, Steve, I'm so sorry. It's my fault. I was talking to Dave with Colors before, and he got in a really bad mood, and it's my fault. It's not your fault. Please don't quit. Please don't quit. And so, okay, all right. I walk over to the line test machine. The only guy I knew was a guy named Paul Bolger. He Irish guy. He's at the line tester, and he doesn't even turn around. He just goes, "Is that you?" I was like, "Yeah." Don't worry about it, mate. It happens to everybody. So anyway, I started working, and I get my first scene like 3 days later. You know, back in the old days, we had these video line testers, and you shoot the stuff in the line tester, and you had to grab Dick and show it to him. So of course, it's like, this is the first time I'd seen him since I showed up, and very icy. He didn't look me in the eye. He just kind of looks at it, makes a few comments. Went on like that for months. Finally, 3 months later, he's just like wondering, I can see he's hovering around my desk, and he just comes over and he goes, "You know, I'm really sorry about your first date. I was in a bad mood. I just wanted to say, I'm really sorry. You're doing some great work." And yeah, so, you know, it had a happy ending.
Yeah. Well, and so usually in, at least as far as traditional animation, and I think still today, really, animators are kind of cast in a way to certain scenes or certain characters. What were you working on the film? Yeah, you had Allison, who did all the princess stuff. You had Paul Bolger, who did all the brigand stuff. He's a big Irish guy, so he has him doing the brigands for some reason. He thought that was a connection. He made the amazing dying soldier, the Turkish soldier. There was animated by a Turkish animator. I don't know, he just seemed to do that. I had no connection. I couldn't find anything that he could associate with me. So I got to work on everything, which is awesome. I wasn't pigeonholed in one thing. A lot of the War Machine stuff there I did. A lot of the Thief stuff I got to work on, the Thief character. A lot of the, I don't know if a lot of people have seen the film, but the scene
that I'm really proud of is the one where the polo ponies are kind of standing on opposite sides of the screen. They come together and then they just kind of swirl around. That took me almost a month just to rough out. Because it had to be really realistic, and I had to study. He wanted me to study horses and how they move, and plus they were kind of a Persian-style horse in the drawing, so it was tricky, but it was great. It was like it was a great learning experience working on that film, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And just thinking, with some of the, what did you get from a sense of some of the other artists and animators? Because I mean, did you knew about film prior to working there? Or?
It was kind of more of a legend than anything real. I mean, it was a story. We all loved Richard Williams' animation. He was famous for his commercial reel, and there was always that story. But did you know he's been working on a feature film for 30 years, 20 years, or whatever. So yeah, no one really believed it. No one really knew. But then now and then you'd see these little clips of, like the thief scene, the war machine scene that they did to try and get money from Saudi Arabia. So that kind of went around a bit on VHS tape when VHS came out, and it was more of just this legend of this thing that was being worked on. So yeah, it was big news when we found out he was gonna. After Roger Rabbit, he was finally getting the money, and so.
And how did this film working on this film differ from the other films and projects you had worked on in animation?
Well, first of all, it was you had Richard Williams, and he's different than any other director I've ever worked with before. I mean, for one thing, he seems like he's got a big ego, but the way he works, it's all about the animation. Nothing else matters. Absolutely nothing else matters. His desk in the first studio was in the corner, but in the building that did most of the work, which we moved into a few days after I started there, his desk was smack dab in the middle, and anybody could approach him at any time if you had a scene to show them. It's like right then and there. I never see that now. It's pretty much all about directors in office cubicles, and there isn't that kind of openness to a director. I mean, there's a few cases, the directors like to work like that, but that was one difference. Was just the openness and if you heard somebody talking about a scene, or if Richard or Dick was like talking to somebody and criticizing a scene, the whole studio could hear it, and we all learned something from that. It was a very organic way of working. So that was probably the biggest difference, I guess, in terms of the system.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And from like a technical standpoint, I mean, for people who know something about animation, a lot of animation, including the Disney features, is done on what they say twos. Every 24 frames per second for film, so every other frame would have a new drawing. But Dick's approach was ones.
All ones.
A unique drawing for every single frame.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just that approach alone, I think, would be something that would be hugely different.
Drawing in ones is if you don't do it right, I don't know if anybody here has done much of the old school character animation on pencil and paper, but it's if you just throw in-betweens in, it just makes it look slippery, and there's a lot of that in The Thief and the Cobbler in certain spots, but it's really tricky. It's really tricky to try and do animation on ones and keep it snappy and not have it get that kind of underwater, slow, slurpy look. The slippery look, I guess. Everything. I mean, some things that had to be on ones, like flies, for example. They had to be on ones constantly, and that was one thing. That was always the fun part. If you were animating The Thief, when it was done, you had to add the flies, and it was great when they could look at your scene and go, okay, that's great, now I add the flies. So you go back, and a week later you come back with 500 pages of flies buzzing around his head, and which all had to be on one.
Yeah. So I get you get the sense that it was a very organic and interactive place. Not one that's sectioned off like as a business. But at what point did what was going on in the studio kind of seem that something was awry, that something was sort of? Because were you there till the bitter end? Or
Yeah. I wasn't there right to the bitter end. I quit I started in early September in 1990, and I quit in early December '91. So it was about 15 months, I guess, and as you know, the plug was pulled 6 months later. But by that point in time, they knew stuff was happening. I think they actually went through a second round of financing or a second chance. They had a couple different chances to, it wasn't just deadline, boom.
Right.
He went through several phases, and we all knew it was coming. It was no secret. It started when they demanded that we work the 60 hours a week, and you had to work it. You had to show up at 8 o'clock, and you had to work till 10 o'clock. Right? They would come around with coffee and whatever, donuts and stuff at 8:30 just to make sure you're at your desk. It got really brutal at the end. I mean, you can't really blame them. They were scared. I mean, they had a lot invested in this, and you know, it was no longer fun and games. This was serious stuff. Everybody had to be a part of it or get out. You know. And I remember that story about the fellow with his baby. Yeah, that was. We knew things were serious when that happened, because that wasn't really normal. I mean, everything got really, really tense. So yeah, it was just a tone. I mean, everything just became all about getting this thing done. And then more months went by, and every morning we had to be there at 8 o'clock for the rushes, and we just look up and it would be the same stuff, just slightly different, like some different effect on it, and there might be like a couple seconds of new animation, but a couple seconds a day isn't going to get a feature film finished, you know. So we knew that things were tough, but it didn't look like it was getting better, and so yeah, I just it got really sad near the end, and I knew it was done, and when I quit, Dick shook my hand and said, you know, no hard feelings, you know, good luck in whatever you do, and he knew it was over at that point, and I imagine it was pretty hard for him for those last 6 months. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you had seen that footage before. I don't even know who shot it exactly. That's this mystery, the home video stuff.
No, I wasn't there.
Because everyone who knew, like, oh, so-and-so has a copy or whatever, is on screen. So it's like, I have no idea who shot it. So there's this weird, like, omniscient presence about it. And I just wonder, looking at it, like, what is on his mind? You know, what could he be talking about to his small talk?
But he was there.
But he was there, yeah. I mean, he had to be. He was the captain, you know. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you ended up seeing the final cut of the movie, the Arabian Night, Princess Cobbler?
Yeah, I rented it on video like a year or 2 or 3 years after.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I knew what it was going to be like, and
Yeah.
I saw all that black Xerox line mixed in with and all those songs and everything, and I just went, oh my God, I wasted 15 months of my life on this. Anyway, but you know, I'm really glad you made that film, because it shows what at least was attempted, and I think you really captured everything that you need to know about that. Like, I was really impressed. It was really, really good. A good portrayal of not just Dick Williams, or not just the thief and the cobbler, but of Dick Williams himself, and the kind of man he was. And like Philip Pepper said there, he was an artist. He was all about the art. He didn't care about the money. He didn't care about anything. You know, he was just all about, passionate about what it was he was creating, and he always had to be creating something.
Yeah.
And it had to be good,
Yeah.
or at least in his eyes, good. And you know, it's just, I don't know what would have happened with Thief and the Cobbler if he hadn't had that pulled from him, like, you know. And who knows?
Right.
But I think you know, it's, in the end, it makes a good story. Good cautionary tale, perhaps, I don't know, but he has so much. Richard Williams had so much more to his credit than just that, so I don't think it's really a big loss that he never finished that film. I think it's really good that he was here as an animator. He lived and he worked, and that's the main thing. And he did a lot of great things, even though, you know, he kind of dropped the ball on that.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine a better way of ending that. So thank you so much, Steve.
Oh,
and,
no.
really, thank you.